support my tongue. You will never be the same.
And with the full catastrophe, he didn't mean it was all bad.
God that I worship has a way of saying, don't play with.
I invite you to the dance with the Lord of the dance.
God didn't call America to do what she's doing in the world now.
Please dance.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Remote Pastoral Care. I'm joined this week in a nice little one-on-one. We've kind of put some of these big panel discussions behind us for a little bit. We're going to go back to some one-on-one conversations. And joining me is our perennial favorite person of all time, Courtney Fraley. Say hi, Courtney.
Hello.
So how's life?
Busy. Nice. The weather's been nice. My daughter is being exceptionally adorable as of late.
I do that.
Trying to scratch out time to do art, managing to scratch out a decent amount of time for housework. Just life, just typical life.
Yeah, that sounds like it. Weather's been pretty good out here too, except for the fact that we're starting to get hit by typhoons, which is always fun.
I'll pass on that. We get seiches around here, but I'll pass on the typhoons. We don't even get tornadoes here. I live on, for those unfamiliar, I live on the coast in northwest lower Michigan, which sounds very specific, but look at a map of Michigan. It's pretty clear where I live.
It's pretty broad. Yeah, no, actually, honest to God, I kind of like typhoons. They're surprisingly fun. When they're not killing people. Yeah. But I remember my first typhoon was when I was here as a student, and I just it's by the time it's gotten inland enough to hit you, it's not that much worse than a typical Midwest thunderstorm.
Yeah.
Except that there's a pause in the middle where you go outside and you're inside a giant circular wall of clouds, which is really kind of cool.
That does sound so. Does it have the vibe of just giant ass rainstorm?
Yeah, pretty much.
Thunderstorm.
Yeah,
I could get behind that, especially if all of the architecture around me was built to withstand it.
Oh yeah, and the architecture is one of the things that's really quite hilarious about it. The house we're living in right now has legit blast shutters that I can drop on all the first floor windows.
Ooh, that's kind of cool.
I'm, the typhoon's coming, and I'm going down the bottom of the house going, lower the blast shields! Lower the blast shields! My Star Wars geek on.
That's amazing. Well, I mean, speaking about getting our geek on, I know we both always have weird, nerdy backgrounds, but I did purchase these cheap internet sunglasses for the express purpose of, now I'm Vash the Stampede.
I know, so I'm loving them.
We can get the full effect there.
Yeah, that is just perfect.
Yeah, I got to get a new profile picture or something. But anyway,
yeah. I've got the same sunglasses actually, just not in the yellow shade, just the standard black lenses.
I've got black lenses too, but the lenses are smaller. These are absolutely huge. Yeah. Freaking love them, and they make everything that I'm looking at look like summertime. It's actually like a really positive vibe. I put them on and immediately I'm transported into retro summer, regardless of where I am. It's a mood. It's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah. I said it makes everything the 1960s, which of course was a perfect time for everybody.
On that note,
what do we want to talk about today?
Well, what do you want to talk about today?
Oh, you never ask a pastor that.
Why?
Because that is a dangerous
Jesus.
question. We're people who have spent our entire lives and careers training for a career based on talking.
Yeah.
You ask a pastor what he wants to talk about, he'd be like, okay, here's the list. And then we get going. We don't shut up, is what I'm saying.
All right. How should we get into this?
We're talking about church.
Yeah, we are talking about church.
What do you feel about church?
Do you really want to know?
That's where you
to sneak the line delivery out of the Natalie Portman rap. Do you really want to know? I don't get what the point is anymore. Christianity, I get the point of. I get the point of organized religion in general. I don't think it's inherently evil. I think it's very easily used for evil, and I think that's a problem that needs to be addressed. The ease with which organized religion is twisted to the evil that men do. But I do get the point of organized religion. I do. It's the church itself that I don't get what it's for. Like, on a certain level I do. There's people like and I hope she'll forgive me if this is too much information or whatever, but there's people like my mom who get a lot out of like praise as part of their spirituality. But even in that case, like you can praise at home. You can there's people who really want to like form a collective and have that community, and the community would be nice if I'd ever really felt community like that stood up to anything from a church. Being able to ask questions of a pastor is really nice, but like, and that's something that I'd really missed, because I've always been one to interrogate my clergy regardless of whether they really liked it or not. But now I'm like, okay, yeah, we're working on this internet church thing, and I think that's a really worthwhile thing. But I've got one of my best friends who's a pastor. I could just ask you whatever insanely blasphemous question comes into my mind, and I'm just like, Don will answer this, or at least he'll have to think about it, and that's probably good. But I don't really get, like, I don't think going into religion with a what's in it for me attitude is necessarily the best thing, even though I think it's one of the most important aspects, like purposes that religion serves in society, is giving some sort of like peace and I don't know, just semblance of order to the universe for a lot of people. I think it helps with that. But I don't get what's in it for me from the church. Like, I don't know what the church is supposed to be doing for me. I know what I can do for the church. I know that I can try and, be there for my fellow man, but I also I do that anyway. I know that I can donate money towards a greater good, but I can do that anyway, that sort of thing.
I think you kind of hit it right on the nose there. The main problem with Western Christianity over the last several hundred years, and I think you managed to encapsulate that perfectly by saying, I don't know what the church does for me, but I know what I do for the church. Like, right there, we've identified one of the primary, I'm not going to narrow it down to just one of the primary issues that particularly the American church has had for generations, which is, and I could, and probably will over the course of this episode, go back and look at some of the proto-church models and the earlier church models and all that. But we've all kind of had this idea that the church is the thing that people come to and give to. The church is the recipient of the community's time and money and efforts, which we then use to do things sometimes. But it's
things
church.
And or stuff.
Go to church because everyone goes to church and we do church. And don't ask why, just it's a thing. Now, one of the things I love to tell American Christians is, do you know what the very first churches were?
Trying to think back to what little I was able to scrape out of like my earliest church experiences. Didn't it basically amount to believers gathering in like hidden rooms in their houses together to share the word of the Lord?
Kind of not.
Okay.
If you ask an evangelical what the first churches were, they're going to say they were house churches, just like all of our startups today. Some things are great and never change, and they're wrong, and I don't mind saying so. Like the first churches, like we think of the first churches as hidden stuff, and we're talking about like early Roman Empire. But that was like after the Jews had been kind of crushed and the persecutions had started and all that. The first churches were before that. Like, if that's what a church was, how do we have Paul in the New Testament writing letters to the great churches in Corinth and Galatia and, all of that? How is he visiting the church in Ephesus if it's a bunch of people hiding out in rooms? Like, these are major letters sent through Roman post that he's sending.
Plot hole.
Yeah, plot hole, exactly. What the early...
I never noticed this crap. My husband's the one who notices plot holes and everything. I'm always like, how did I not see that?
Right. Well, it's convenient for us not to notice this stuff until we do. But the early churches, like, I'm not going to say they were mega churches. They sure as hell weren't, because that's not a thing that ever had existed or should exist. At me if you like. I don't believe mega churches should exist. But the earliest churches were that terrifying word, the word that puts fear in the heart of any red-blooded apple pie eating coronary bypass having American.
Communes.
Yes, that's the word. Oh God, were they communes?
Small scale communism. It works.
Yeah, it works, and the Christians got there first. Notwithstanding proto.
Really though.
Well, I mean,
there's evidence to support this. This isn't just a supposition based upon what available theology there is.
Forgive me for not being able to cite chapter and verse because I'm a terrible
but yeah, like I want to know.
But it is in
you got to
the
get better at that too, because I can't just throw these ideas at like friends and family and be like, "Hey, by the way, you're wrong." They're like source, and I'm like,
I honestly
just trust me.
And I find this position shared by a lot more actual pastors that I know. Is that the ability to memorize a particular English translation text and know chapter verse becomes less useful when you realize just how much variation there is in translation and interpretation. Like, I
get that. I think more what I just, this is a bit of an aside, but more what I would kind of suggest is like after we do one of these, like dig up the stuff and like put it in the notes on YouTube. Or
I will definitely try to do that, presuming I remember.
Well, you're talking to somebody with like ADHD here. I'm not the one to tell you how to remember to do shit.
But anyway, it is in the Bible where they talk about what those early communities were, where there were places where everyone pools their resources, and then the apostles, pay out to all each as they have need. That's I want to say it was in Romans. God help me, my chapter verse quotation is terrible.
No, that's fine. Just knowing that there's a scriptural basis for it, even just the book to look in.
Yeah, that's not just archaeological evidence. That's like in the actual scripture. That is what.
But there is archaeological evidence too, then.
Oh yeah, early churches were totally communes in that way. There were actually a lot of offshoot sects that kind of dabbled in communism, but the Christian churches were kind of the first ones to play with that, like full scale. Because their theory, and like it or not, I think the theory holds out if everybody's on the same page. But their theory was that if everybody's on the same moral page, then it doesn't matter what you have. As long as because we're all about the sharing life. We're all about making sure everyone's okay. And if we're all on the same page with that, then possession kind of stops being a thing that matters. And it worked out well for a time. Persecutions came and went. The churches went underground for a time. And then comes that guy, John Wick. No, the other guy, Constantine. That's the one.
Yeah.
Making a deep Keanu Reeves cut there, by the way. And I'm not referring to Constantine, the character from the Keanu Reeves movie. I'm referring to Constantine, the Roman emperor. Constantine. Basically, he did a lot of stuff, but he basically made Christianity not just legit, but public legit. It was the official religion of the Roman Empire, and Christians went from, communes in the shadows to we've got the backing of the government. And it is amazing how much a little bit of power or a lot of power will turn things the hell around.
Not necessarily for the better.
I would argue not. It didn't take long for the whole commune structure to disappear in favor of a more structured authoritarian religious institution. We talk about the line of apostolic succession in the Catholic Church, or the Church Universal, as you prefer, because there wasn't anything else back then, going all the way back to St. Peter. But the truth is, the birth of the institutional church really comes post-Constantine. That's where bishops start having formal public authority. They start having a role in the community. They are community leaders. That's where the shiny hats and the gold capes and all the other stuff start showing up.
Shiny hats.
Yeah. Well, I mean, come on. You've seen popes. How would you describe their hats without using the word phallic?
Nothing wrong with fashion. You're talking to somebody who's wearing yellow sunglasses to a 9 p.m. Zoom meeting because fashion.
You're cool. I just figured the sunglasses are necessary.
I have never been considered cool by anyone.
Well, welcome to our community. You're cool. So now we get to the point where there's power and stuff involved in this. And that's where we see the first shift to a dynamic that's less about what can we do for each other and more about how do you fit into Mother Church? And now that's seen mutations and mutations over the years. I'm not going to give you a complete breakdown of church history across the early Middle Ages and onto the Americas and stuff like that. But when we get to kind of puritanical America, which, by the way, Puritans, not the greatest people.
No, that's going around right now.
Yeah, that's something we always forget as Americans, that this was a murderous offshoot cult and was not strictly religious, mainliners here. They were not just looking for freedom. Boy, howdy, did they have some strict ideas about what a heavily controlled community should look like. Now, by this point, though, and this starts with the Middle Ages Catholic Church and stuff like that, churches were the communities. Throughout the whole cathedral age, your church, the whole of your community was built around the church. The leader of you didn't have mayors, you had priests. They were the center of education, they were the center of commerce. And at first it wasn't as deliberate, but in time, that became a power structure that was maintained. And that formed into the basis of what we can now call church, which is the church is the center of the community into which people go to contribute. And then the church grows out of that and then doles out as is necessary, mostly for the maintenance of our giant, wonderful cathedral building, which is the center of our community. Now we meet in, more rundown, white walled sanctuaries. The principle underlying it has remained the same for centuries upon centuries. And so that's kind of at the heart of what you're experiencing there. Anything surprising here for you as yet?
Well, again, I feel my inner artist being but art is important and architecture is art and it's for the glory of God and all that. But
no, you're not wrong.
At the end of the day, I'm still very much team people have needs and those should be met before we're indulging in extras.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think the issue here was the maintenance of cathedrals. The issue here was more the maintenance of the power structure that controlled the cathedrals. Now, I am very obviously not going to take a stand against pastors drawing a paycheck. That would be very self-defeating on my end. And also, we got to live too. However, so much of the Catholic Church in that era was about basically the pyramid scheme of religion, directing the funds upwards so that you can support the entire institution.
You're going to tick a lot of people off with this one, Don. The pyramid scheme of religion. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not really in a position to, but
that is more or less how it operated. It's unfortunate and it's annoying, but that is kind of what it did. It directed a lot of local community funds and resources upwards in order to sustain the larger Vatican institution. It is what it is. I think it's funny to call it a pyramid scheme of religion because that's kind of how it worked. But it is what it is. And modern denominations, for all of the good that I feel that they do not operate in a distinctly different way. We take, in a modern denomination, we take each local congregation. The local congregation has to pay X amount of money per member to the regional body, which then pays X amount of money per member to the national level body, in order to keep funds flowing at all levels. It's a bit more egalitarian, but like the structure is still the same. You gather from the masses and it goes up. Now, the difference between that and the early communist structure is that it was meant to be a circle. You take from everybody, it goes in, and then it comes back out to everybody equal. When you get to this post-Constantine, late Roman, kind of early Middle Ages structure, you take from the bottom and it goes up, but that trickle down effect, that umbrella at the top that makes the full circle, didn't happen as much. You had benevolence funds, you had things like that, but they were single event things. They were not a structure that kept things in motion. It was, now it's at the top, it is our largesse as the church that we reach out on this occasion. The mentality behind it changed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that seems like a relatively small shift, the shift from function to charity. But it's a big deal for a church. It's a big deal.
That's you're not going to have any kind of a fight on your hands with me on that one. That's very much the argument of, and again, I'm showing my political biases here, but that's very much the same as like the argument between oh well, the very, very wealthy see fit to give away lots of their money to this, that, and the other thing, as opposed to the exorbitantly wealthy should have to share this much of their wealth and don't get to pick and choose which individuals are worthy.
Yeah. And now we've hit upon the main issue here that the church fell afoul of in those days, which is they crossed the line from deliberate structure to aid to the voluntary charity of an institution in aid. It became a thing that we choose to do because it's a duty when we feel that we have the ability to do that. And it stopped to be something that was baked into the structure. The difference between the communist early churches and the institutional religion that followed it was exactly that. So
then I'm left with, again, like what am I supposed to be getting out of the church? Which again still feels like a really selfish question, because I'm very much in favor of giving of yourself to others being kind of an essential concept for religion as a general rule.
Well, if you ask most any pastor, I say most because there's some whack jobs out there. We've met them. I may actually be one, don't know, but I cannot say so. But if
you're definitely a whack job. I have no illusions about that.
Yeah, well, I've earned my whack jobbery, wholeheartedly. But if you ask most any pastor out there, they'll tell you that living in a church community is meant to be a give and take relationship. So you're supposed to get something out of it, but you're also supposed to be giving back to it. And that's supposed to be true for people at every level of the church. And it's not just a financial thing, too. And any pastor is going to tell you that and right now I'm talking about, by the way, I'm talking about the pre-COVID model of church, which is basically what we think of when we think of the Christian church in the 1950s through about the 1990s. This is the kind of church model we're thinking of here. The American church that was the center of the community. Everybody went on Sunday. Everybody still interacts. There are, by the way, a few community structured churches out there that are still doing this model and doing it well. But particularly since COVID, a lot of churches that have been trying to do that model that have already been failing died. But in that model, everybody comes to church. Everybody's part of the community. If you're one of the wealthy members of the community, then by God, come that plate come around, you best be whipping out your paycheck. You better be taking out that checkbook and you better be putting a couple of zeros in that plate, because that's what you have and that's what you have to give.
Yeah.
Conversely, if you are like a lot of us these days, coming from a background where you're like, well, I got a couple of pennies, but it's, I could maybe turn those into food for my kid. So I don't know. Then what you have to give is time, resources, and talent.
That's a worthwhile thing to say, because I remember feeling pressured to tithe when I was not making a lot of money. And it's like, when you're bringing home a $400 check, that tithe is a lot.
It is. And, I've seen a lot of churches make a big deal about the you must tithe 10% thing. And there is, and I'm not even going to bother going back to look it up. There's some sort of Old Testament, I think it may have been referenced again in the New, I don't totally sure, argument for a 10% figure. But I remember looking up that argument and it's like, that's a stretch. It really is. And there's so much about context that's important here, because, you look at the story, the parable of the widow and the coin. Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a Jesus.
Gave what little she had.
Yeah, it's a Jesus story of Jesus sitting outside the temple, and he's watching all the people, the Pharisees and the Sadducees come in, and they're like, it's giving day. Look at me, I'm giving all of this great amount of wealth, and it's like 2% of what they might have in a given week, but it's a huge amount of money to everyone else. And they're like, oh, how great are you? And then they see this widow sneak in with her one little coin and drop it in, and for years, Christians in particular have taken this as a story to say, that widow, man, look at the faith of her giving such a huge percentage of what she already has. Truly, her faith is the best. That's not what that story was about. That story was about the institution that felt that it was okay to force an old widow to give up a huge percentage of her earnings in order to be a part of the community. It was a cautionary tale, not a story of praise. And when you go back and read it, you're like, oh, hang on. Jesus wasn't really lauding this woman. He was saying, wow, Pharisees.
I feel like thinking back on it, because that's one I'm really like, we're actually talking about a bit of we're getting a storm. We're actually talking about a bit of scripture that I'm reasonably intimately familiar with. And it's occurring to me that the inflection used for some of the words in that scripture are going to kind of change everything, like the emphasis.
A little bit. Yeah. But that right there.
One of many times where I've thought, it really would have been nice to hear Jesus talk in person for a lot of reasons, not just a lot of reasons, starfucker reasons, but like I just used the term starfucker in reference to Jesus. I'm going to hell, but
I'll meet you there.
But like for the actual contextual, like there's so much more that you receive from words when you hear them spoken than just reading them on the page.
Without doing my on-the-spot due diligence exegesis, I will say too that, it's worth noting that this kind of bastard pigged-in language that is English does not carry in its words anywhere near the nuance and shade of meaning that you'll find in like ancient Greek and Hebrew, where, the word choice that they use, like, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but I was talking on the other new program that we're doing, Back to Basics, which is replacing our Sunday sermons. I've been working on that with Lindsay, and we're working our way through the book of Mark, and we're doing it linguistically. We're looking at all of the biblical language and stuff like that. And we were just having a riot at how many different words in the Greek keep getting translated to the same word in English.
Well, and you can tell, I mean, this is a bit of an aside, but you can tell a lot of surprising things about a culture from what their language prioritizes too.
Yeah.
I've always found it unfortunate, and this is something positive that I got from the church. I want to give credit to like Western institutionalized Christianity where it is actually due. It's where I started really thinking about that, because they talk about the different words for love. Mm-hmm. And in English, we've basically just got love. Like there's not, I mean, you can add modifiers onto it, unconditional love, romantic love, familial love, that sort of thing. But the fact is, at the end of the day, we just have the one word. And it's like, that's a really big concept with a lot of different permutations.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of disappointingly telling that the English language really only has, like, I'm a conversational Spanish speaker, and like Spanish has more words for love.
Right. That's true of most languages. And without getting my linguist cap on too far, it's because of the the kind of bastardized pagan origins of English, is it was meant to be an efficient language and not necessarily a nuanced language as it came into being. So it is what it is. But honestly, I'm of the opinion that the English language is probably the worst language to make a primary biblical translation in. But
that's fair.
You know, it is what it is. But
you know, you got me wanting to find a Spanish Bible.
Go for it.
I will. No, don't test me. Don't threaten me with a good time. Continue. I'm sorry.
No. Now you've got me tempted to whip out my 110-year-old Latin Bible and have some real fun with it. But
pass.
That's for another day.
Fun.
Hey, we have our own definitions of fun. It's okay.
That's fair. That's fair.
But no, so that right there, I think, we talk about the story of the widow and the coin and the differing move to kind of a more capitalist-centric approach to Christianity. So much in this period of the 1950s to the 1990s, this period of Christianity, so much became focused on allocation of resources rather than allocation of commitment or allocation of heart. I think you've found something.
I'm writing something down because I'll forget it otherwise. I guess I can just say it aloud here since you noticed it and mentioned it on the freaking Zoom meeting. But it occurred to me, a lot of the stuff that we talk about sounds like we're just, like closet politicians with an agenda that we're trying to shoehorn into Christianity, when really I think it's the other way around. And how I was going to type just a note of, how to clarify that.
Well,
morally clarify it too, to where it's, I feel like self-examination is always very important, especially when you're trying to do something that effectively is going to influence other people's thinking.
I agree.
It's deeply important to be introspective and honestly introspective, and to examine what you're doing. I don't think that's what's going on here, but I could see very easily a lot of people looking at a lot of the things that we talk about, and especially, it's part of why I kind of try and wear my political affiliations on my sleeve. So it's like, hey, I'm not hiding any of this here. It's something that my husband's a journalist, and something that he wishes he could do because he thinks it would actually be more a higher state of integrity to be like, hey, by the way, side note, this is my own personal political affiliations. I'm not incorporating them here, but that's fair to know. I don't think that's what's going on here. I very much think it's a matter of when you interrogate the text, and this is thinking all the way back to when I was a small child, it very much reads as, hey, we should all share everything we have. You should give what you have to other people, like all of it. Just share and give and, cooperate and all of this, lefty, let's hold hands bullshit. But, if that's what's there.
Well, here's the thing. As you can probably
so you see why I didn't want to say it. It's a huge diversion.
No, it's not. It's not actually, and it's important when we're talking when we're talking about deconstructing where religion is right now and what it's supposed to do. Constantly coming back to check yourself to make sure that you're not deconstructing for the sake of just blowing shit up, and that you're actually deconstructing for the sake.
I wanted to say this, so I'm making it say this.
Yeah, the difference between exegesis and eisegesis. The difference between reading out from the text and reading yourself into the text. It's one of the first things we talk about in seminary. It's a big deal, and it's something we should keep going back and checking on. So what I'm going to say to that for now, this may surprise you or may not, probably won't, honestly.
There's a wonderful storm outside right now. Go ahead.
Yeah. This may not surprise you to hear that I have been cornered many times by evangelical types who ask me, where do you get off trying to rip down and oppress other Christians like this? And what comes to me in all of these situations, because I get from the perspective of an evangelical who's kind of built their whole lives around this sort of powerful, oppressive institutional Christianity, that being told, no, you're wrong, and that's not what the faith is about at any point, does seem oppressive. However, perspective is important. And what I keep coming back to is a line that I never forgot from that most holy and sacred of texts, Captain America, the First Avenger, that particular movie. I know I'm going to use Marvel to make a point, but goddamn, it isn't a good point to make. You've seen the movie, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I've seen them. As I sit here with a Doctor Who background and anime sunglasses and a video game bracelet, yes, I've seen like every Marvel movie.
Yeah, we all know our good pop culture. So there's this scene in that first Captain America movie where he's sitting with Dr. Erskine, the German scientist who, injects him with super, all that. And
the expat guy, yeah.
Yeah, and they're talking about, why the hell are you doing this and things like that. And Erskine says a line that I never forgot. He says, everyone forgets that the first country that Germany invaded was her own.
Yeah.
When we talk about, progressive Christianity as this new thing that's trying to, break and oppress old Christianity, it's, no.
It's not that.
We're living in the aftermath of our apocalypse here. We're trying to push back and reclaim what it means to be Christianity from people who have already done that, who have seized our tools, seized our Savior, and used it as a means to oppress people for a very long time.
Yeah.
We're originalists in that way. And I think it's important to recognize that, but it's also important at the same time to recognize that people do have a vested interest in oppressive systems. It's why, it's the same reason why people can chant Black Lives Matter and half the country's like, no, they don't. It's because, not because they hate people, it's because they have a vested interest in keeping this system intact, whether they'll admit to it or not. And it's terrifying and it's painful and it hurts to see, but it's still got to be confronted.
Yeah.
So I hope that kind of answered your question there.
Yeah. How to, well, I mean, honestly, I do have a, like irritating politician streak to me, despite having never really gotten personally into politics. Just wait for it. It'll come eventually, but
I'm sure.
I don't want to. It's one of those things that it's one of the more irritating God things in my life where it's like, I don't want to, but just constantly just like, hey. I'm like, no, I don't have time or energy, and I'm not the personality to put myself out there like that. But I was honestly thinking more like optics, because it's very easy to paint this church with a pinko brush when we give them this much ammunition. But if you're looking at the actual teachings of Christ, he'd be hung out as a, bleeding heart lefty, out of touch with reality, doesn't want people to succeed, like all of the stuff that gets thrown,
one of the
doesn't believe in the value of hard work for what you deserve, and
one of
like
the most depressing
falsehoods that sound really true until you hold them up to the light and look through them.
One of the most depressing truths about the human condition is that it is very easy to make justice seem like violence and to make violence seem just, when in fact neither are the other.
Is this about the Nazi punching again?
I'm not talking about the Nazi punching.
Okay.
I have a very complicated relationship with that subject, and we'll save that for another podcast.
All right.
But it is easy to make the two look like each other. It's easy to look at justice and paint it as if it's some sort of violent, oppressive act, when it's not. It's a liberative act. And it's easy to look at violence and say, now that is what justice looks like, when that is a destructive act. And that's because of how kind of screwed up we are as humans. And that is, if you look at what happened to Jesus. Like, he was the victim of violence that was touted as justice. And that was that was a situation that was conquered not with more violence, but with resurrective love and justice. And that is the ultimate Christian story here. But the side of it is that we got to kind of suffer through it. We got to take the hits when people say, you are this, that, and the other thing. Well, okay, maybe you think we're pinko, but is that a bad thing?
Well, I think it's very easy, and I speak from experience with this because, again, I try to be very transparent about this was not always the way that I thought about things.
Mm-hmm.
But I lost my train of thought. Cool. Okay. Sorry, ADD strikes again. I had something meaningful to say. I swear I did.
That
was it. Yeah, I think it's very easy to look at the maintenance of order as good, just regardless, like without interrogating it further than that. To be like, okay, well, this is the upholding of the law, the protection of the status quo, that sort of thing. I feel like it's very easy to look at that as like, well, of course that's good and right, and that's very much how I looked at it when I was younger too.
Yeah.
I was a good, obedient little kid. But
peace that is quiet, not peace that is justice.
Sorry, what was that?
I said the favoring of peace that is quiet, not peace that is justice.
Yeah. And sometimes justice involves upending how things are, because sometimes the existing situation, whether instantly or intentionally or slowly or accidentally, becomes unjust.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something I feel like, again, I'm sorry for this getting so like stumpy on my part. It was not the plan.
No, that's perfect. I think you're on the right track.
This isn't about the church though. It's about the country. Like, that's how this country got started. Was we decided, hey, this system not working, not right, not okay with us. We're going to do something different. Yeah, it's crazy. It's completely off the wall. And, this is the whole world is looking at us like, really? That's your plan? You're going to just blow up the way everything is and try and go on this weird tangent that nobody's doing right now. And that's going to work out for you. That's your plan with what you're going to do with all these people's lives.
Yeah,
but we did, and it worked, and it's our duty to keep making it better. And I feel like it's that goes beyond, to try and bring it out of the America context. Like, I feel like that's the duty of everyone, not just Americans, to keep trying to make your society better. And if the church isn't helping to make society better, that's kind of where it falls apart for me. And that's a big part of why I've drifted away so much, is it's like, this isn't making it better.
I think this is a perfect cliffhanger to end part one of this episode, and we're gonna try to resolve this a little bit in part two.
All right.
So we're gonna pause here for a moment, and I want to say, if you're still watching this, thanks for hanging in there. This is a lot of what it's like to be a member of our community, to have these conversations near constantly. We're doing most of this on our Discord server, but we also have videos that come out throughout the week on topics just like this. Most of this you can find on our website. Link is in the description, with along with all the other references we've made in this video that I promise I have totally remembered to put there. And if you don't find them for some reason, because I totally remembered to put them there, then feel free to leave a comment so that I know about it, and I'll try to answer that, because that will definitely help. In the meantime, check out
Bug him, not me. I'm just like here for the ride. He thinks I'm important for some reason. So,
because you are. But yeah, in the meantime, check out the website, check out our Facebook page. All of this is available, links in the description, yada, yada, yada. But most importantly, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whatever you're going through, I just want you to know that I'm thinking about you, we're thinking about you, and God's with you too. Take care.